Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to a world where your morning routine includes dodging chamber pots, brushing with soot, and maybe accidentally drinking something that used to be a latrine. That's right, we're slipping into the mucky, musky, surprisingly spiritual world of hygiene during the Black Plague. You're not strolling through some quaint medieval village tonight. You're trudging through slop-filled alleys, dodging rats the size of terriers, and trying not to breathe through your nose. It's the year 1347. You've just arrived in a bustling European city. Let's say, Florence. The streets are loud, close, and unpaved. You can smell them before you see them. Mud mixes with animal dung, old food, rotten straw, and the occasional pile of who knows what. You sidestep a suspicious puddle, then another. Whoops, too late. That was not just water. Your shoe now squelches. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle past a blacksmith's forge and a tannery. The forge smells of sweat and hot iron. The tannery, well, imagine boiling leather, dog feces, and moldy vinegar. That's the signature scent. Oh, and next door? A butcher's stall with fly-covered carcasses and meat hanging under the summer sun. You want to throw up? But you also haven't eaten today. Decisions. There are no sidewalks and certainly no sewers. People just dump waste, yes, all kinds, straight into the street. Morning and evening. Someone leans out a window and yells, "Gardaloo!" That's your 2-second warning to duck before they toss out a slop bucket. If you're not alert, congratulations. Your nightshirt is now polka-dotted with pee. Rats dart between shadows, thick-tailed and fearless. You see one nibbling a discarded apple core. You see another dash under a cartwheel. These little guys? Yeah, they're about to become history's most infamous Uber drivers, for fleas carrying Yersinia pestis, the bacteria behind the Black Death. You pass a group of children kicking around a tied-up sheep bladder. It's the closest thing to a ball, and hey, it's still kind of bouncy. One of them has a running sore on his neck. No one's too concerned. Yet, the town square is bustling. Traders shout over each other, selling everything from fabrics to dried fish. A woman hawks fresh milk, which she's been carrying in a bucket since dawn. It's now late afternoon and the milk is developing personality. Hygiene here isn't just about staying clean. It's a luxury, and not one many people can afford. You catch a whiff of someone passing by. It's hard to tell where they end and their clothes begin. Most people have one set of garments, maybe two if they're lucky, and they wash them once a season, give or take. Clothes are rarely tailored. You're basically swaddled in wool, linen, and sweat. Your underclothes? If you're noble, you've got linen shifts. If you're not, you might go commando under your coarse wool tunic. Either way, it itches. Constantly, you try to find clean water. There's a communal well, but there's a rumor someone's goat fell in last week. Some folks don't care. Others boil their water if they have firewood to spare. Most don't, so they drink ale. Even toddlers. It's weak, but at least it's boiled. Sort of. Here's a weird one. Instead of soap, people often scrub with ashes or animal fat. Soap does exist, made from lye and rendered fat, but it's harsh and pricey. So unless you're rich or lucky, your clean still smells like smoke and bacon. Now, here comes something historians still argue about. Did people know they were dirty by our standards? Or did their noses just adjust? Some argue the concept of personal odor didn't exist the way it does now. Others say that stench was so common it was invisible, like background noise you tune out. As you push through the market, someone brushes past you, their sleeve sticky with something red. Is it wine? Blood? Tomato? Just kidding, no tomatoes in Europe yet. So probably not that. You look up and see laundry lines strung between windows. Some of the garments flutter in the breeze. Shirts, socks, long woolen underthings. But don't be fooled. These aren't exactly fresh. Washed in river water, slapped on stones, and dried in soot-laced wind, they're mostly less gross, not clean. You spot a street performer juggling knives. He's barefoot, The stones are sharp. His feet are calloused, dirty, and maybe infected. Someone tosses him a coin. He picks it up with his toes, then resumes juggling. You duck into a church for some quiet. It's cool inside, the air heavy with incense. Here's the thing. Churches often smell better than anything else in town. Frankincense, beeswax, flowers, and yes, a touch of mildew. You sit for a moment, listening to a monk chant in Latin. He hasn't bathed in months, maybe years, but he glows with spiritual serenity. Apparently, saints don't need soap. You step back outside into the late afternoon light. A funeral procession shuffles past, cart, cloth-wrapped body, slow chanting. No one's sure what the person died of, but murmurs of a distant sickness are spreading. Venice has closed its ports. Genoa is worried. You're starting to feel a tickle in your throat. And still, the rats scurry. The fleas bite. The wells stagnate. And the streets stew. Tomorrow, the plague begins. You wake with a start. The morning sun already peeking through the narrow wooden shutters of your rented loft. If you can call it that. Really, it's more of a storage nook above a tannery, with just enough room for a straw mattress and your legs if you sleep diagonally. The air smells stronger today, like meat left too long on the table. There's a tension in the street noise outside. People arguing, carts rattling faster than usual, and somewhere, a distant bell tolling at the wrong time. Word has spread. The sickness is in Marseille now. Some say it traveled by boat. Others swear it was a punishment from God. But you need a bath. So you head down toward the public bathhouse. Yes, they exist, at least for now. And for a brief moment, you actually feel a flicker of hope. Bathhouses used to be a real treat. Warm water, steam, maybe even oils and clean linens if the owner's feeling generous. You duck inside the low brick building near the monastery wall. The air is thick and wet, and bodies shuffle around in linen wraps. You're hit by a confusing blend of herbs, sweat, damp wood, and something metallic? It's almost nice. Almost. The water in the tub is lukewarm and murky, with little bits of soap root floating like sad petals. A man dunks his head with a groan. You ease in slowly, sighing. And then someone mutters, "The bathhouses spread the plague." The room stills. You freeze mid-soak. Several people step out of the pool. A woman wraps herself quickly and bolts for the door. The owner tries to calm everyone, but it's no use. One man crosses himself and whispers that the Pope condemned public bathing. Something about nakedness leading to sin, and sin leading to sickness. You drain out and leave with your tunic clinging damply to your back. Turns out bathhouses are already falling out of favor. Once a staple of medieval hygiene, especially in cities like Paris, London, or Prague, they're now caught in a web of suspicion. Some religious authorities are saying the warmth opens your pores to the devil. Others fear that the water used by multiple people carries disease. Plus, it doesn't help that bathhouses often doubled as brothels. The line between steamy relaxation and sinful behavior was razor thin. Fun fact, bathhouses had names like the Cardinal Steam or Angel's Cauldron, and yes, they often included menu boards of both bathing options and companionship choices. So now the church is side-eyeing anyone who enjoys a long soak. Still, historians debate whether bathhouses were truly widespread or limited to bigger cities. Rural folks may have stuck to rivers and basins, but even in urban areas, those with money preferred private tubs. Wooden barrels lined with linen, filled with heated water by servants hauling buckets from the hearth. Not luxurious, but at least you didn't share the water with everyone from the fishmonger to the local drunk. You ask a friend about his hygiene routine. He shrugs and says he bathes once a month. Whether I need it or not, it's a joke, kind of. Instead of bathing, people now lean into dry cleaning, medieval style. You know, changing undergarments, maybe, rubbing themselves with cloths, or sprinkling rosewater on skin and linen. It's not uncommon to simply air out clothes by hanging them outside in the breeze. Some beat their garments with sticks to knock off the dirt, plus the fleas if they're lucky. There's a new fear whispering through town, that water itself is dangerous. Not just the drinking kind, but the washing kind. The belief grows that pores are gateways and opening them, especially with hot water, lets bad humors or miasmas, that is, bad air, seep in. Some folks even smear their skin with clay or oils to seal the body shut. It's like medieval SPF against invisible demons. You notice people starting to avoid touching each other. Not dramatically, but subtly. A merchant hands you a coin with 2 fingers instead of the full palm. A mother pulls her child close when you pass. You touch your face without thinking, and then realize you've done it. There's that throat tickle again. A few still go to bathhouses, defiantly. They rub themselves with crushed herbs, lavender, rosemary, or even wormwood, and murmur prayers under their breath. Some bring amulets, little carved stones or wax seals marked with saint symbols, to ward off evil while they soak. Here's your fringe fact of the night. In Hungary, some bathhouses employed people whose job was to beat you with sticks. Not maliciously, it was believed that vigorous slapping with birch branches opened your pores and purged toxins. You know, the fun way to cleanse. You pass a noble's estate, and a servant dumps a steaming pot of water into the street gutter. Rich folks still bathe, though more privately. They can afford scented oils, milled soap from Aleppo or Castile, and linen drying cloths. But even among the wealthy, bathing is becoming taboo. Queen Isabella of Castile supposedly bragged that she only bathed twice in her life, on her wedding day and before her coronation. Hard to fact-check that one, but hey, it's the vibe. Back in your corner of the city, the bathhouse closes the next day. The owner boards up the door. A painted skull appears on the wood paneling. It's unclear if someone died inside or if it's just a warning. But either way, no one will risk it now. You sit on the edge of your cot, wiping dust from your face with a damp scrap of linen. No more steam, no more soaks, just a bucket, a cloth, and the faint hope that what you're doing might keep the sickness away. It won't. You've stopped trying to stay clean in the modern sense. At this point, clean means not visibly muddy or doesn't smell worse than the butcher's stall. But maybe that's okay, because here comes a man who hasn't washed in 10 years, and people treat him like a living saint. He's a monk, bald on top, brown robes, bare feet toughened like old leather. He walks with slow, reverent steps through the market, a small wooden cross in hand. Children stare. Adults nod and whisper. You edge closer. He smells like incense, mildew, and a hint of old cabbage. Monks, especially those in ascetic orders, often practiced extreme hygiene denial. The belief that the body is sinful and cleansing it too much, especially with pleasure, leads to temptation. And during plague times, this spiritual austerity takes on new urgency. You don't just avoid bathing. You avoid mirrors, silk, laughter, anything that makes the flesh feel at ease. This is a world where bathing isn't seen as healthy. It's suspicious. The cleaner you are, the more likely you're flirting with vanity, indulgence, or worse, pride. And pride, as every dusty sermon will remind you, goes before a fall, or a fever, or a big purple lump under your arm. You spot another example of holy grime. A mystic woman who lives in a stone cell near the town's edge. She's locked herself involuntarily, has a small window for food and waste, and hasn't touched water in over a decade. She claims the angels keep her clean. Whether they do or not, the townspeople believe her. They bring offerings. One even touches her wall, hoping to absorb her immunity. That guy now has a cough. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Many of these unwashed holy types don't get sick right away. Coincidence? Divine protection? Or maybe just lucky genetics? Historians still argue whether some spiritual recluses survived by sheer isolation or whether their filthy, low-contact lives helped them avoid infected fleas. Meanwhile, you try another tactic. Perfume. Perfumed pouches, or pomanders, are everywhere now. You hang one around your neck, cloth stuffed with herbs, dried flowers, and vinegar-soaked sponges. The idea is that strong smells can block out the miasma, that deadly bad air people blame for spreading disease. Some folks shove herbs up their nostrils. Others carry posies or citrus fruits studded with cloves. The richer you are, the better your smells. The poorer, well, rosemary and garlic will have to do. You duck into a candle shop and see tallow sticks infused with lavender. The shopkeeper swears they purify the air. You buy one. Promptly melts unevenly and splashes wax on your sleeve. Now you smell like herbs and scorched sheep fat. Delightful. At the city's edge, a priest gives a sermon under a gray sky. He urges repentance, not bathing. Washing your soul, not your hands. You wonder if that counts as medical advice. But to the crowd, it does. People weep. Someone strips off their shirt and flogs their own back in penance. Flagellants, they're called. Bands of roving self-whippers who believe the plague is divine punishment for sin. If they suffer enough in public, maybe God will spare the rest. They do not smell good, but they are loud and convincing. You return to your corner of the loft and splash your face with water. Just your face. You don't want to open your pores too much. The monk's voice rings in your head. God does not dwell in soap, and yet you can't help it. Your skin itches. Your scalp burns. Are those lice? Oh right, they're part of the hygiene landscape too. Lice, fleas, and mites are so common they're practically household pets. People have combs not for styling but for scraping out the hitchhikers. You try to sleep and feel tiny legs moving at your neckline. Scratch, scratch, scratch. You visit a healer the next day. She's not a doctor, those are few and mostly clueless, but she knows plants. She gives you a balm of crushed bay leaves, honey, and vinegar. You smear it on. You smell like salad dressing, but at least your scalp tingles less. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some monks believed that bathing might dilute their holiness. Clean skin was a distraction from purity. One order banned full baths altogether, allowing only hand and foot washing before prayer. And guess what? Their mortality rate was no worse than the scrubbed city folk. You ask someone if they think the unwashed live longer. They shrug. They die slower, a man says. But they still die. A local doctor, who mostly wears black robes and quotes Aristotle, offers leeches to draw out your corrupted humors. You pass. He frowns and calls you reckless. One woman tells you she rubs her arms with wool until the skin flakes. Dry washing, she calls it. It makes her feel lighter, cleaner. Her knuckles are cracked and red, but she hasn't caught the plague. Yet, you begin to see how complicated the concept of hygiene really is here. It's not just about dirt. It's about theology, superstition, social class, and access. Clean might mean sinful. Dirty might mean holy. And somewhere in between, there's a lot of itching and praying. As the sun sets and the wind shifts, carrying with it the reek of the town and a distant whiff of something dead, you curl up on your straw mattress and whisper a small prayer of your own. You don't feel cleaner, but maybe, just maybe, you feel protected. You wake to a low murmuring outside. Men talking in anxious tones, women muttering prayers under their breath. The illness has arrived. There's no more pretending. 2 streets over, a merchant collapsed in his doorway with blackened fingertips. Another neighbor hasn't come out in days. The shutters on her house are nailed shut. And someone, maybe trying to be helpful, maybe just terrified, has smeared a red X on the door. You tie your cloak tighter and head toward the apothecary. Not for medicine, there really isn't any, but for information. People say he's seen it all. Maybe he knows how to stay alive. Maybe he'll sell you something that smells less like fear. Outside his shop stands a figure dressed like a nightmare. Long black robe, gloves, wide-brimmed hat, and a bird-like mask with a beak so long it could peck your elbow. You blink. Is it a costume? Is it armor? No, this is the infamous plague doctor outfit. You stare. He doesn't wave, doesn't blink, just stares through round glass eye holes. The beak, you're told, is filled with fragrant herbs. Rose petals, mint, cloves, cinnamon. Anything to keep the bad air out. People still believe the plague is spread by miasma. Noxious, corrupted air that seeps into the lungs and poisons the blood. You kind of believe it too. I mean, have you smelled this city? This suit is supposed to protect him. But let's be real, it doesn't. The robe isn't sealed. The gloves are just leather. And the mask? It's more of a hopeful barrier than a real one. But it does something important. It makes people feel like there's a defense. It turns death into something you can see coming. something that looks like a walking crow. You spot another man copying the look, but instead of herbs, he's stuffed the beak with rotted oranges. Claims the fermenting fruit traps the sickness. Another swears by garlic. One woman walks around with a full bouquet of thyme strapped to her chest like a lopsided corsage. Still, historians argue whether these costumes were ever widely worn during the actual 1347 to 1351 plague wave. Some believe they only appeared during later outbreaks in the 1600s. But let's not quibble over timelines. You've got a long day ahead, and plague waits for no pedant. A child tugs your sleeve. His nose is running. His cheeks are red. "Do you have the doctor's beak?" he asks. You shake your head. He shrugs. "It doesn't work anyway." Then he runs off. You duck into the apothecary's shop, bells jingling behind you. The shelves are cluttered with vials, jars, dried herbs, and things in bottles that used to wiggle. He greets you with a nod. You ask for something, anything that might protect you. He offers you a wax tablet scented with sage and myrrh. You pay too much for it. He throws in a vinegar sponge as a bonus. "Sniff it when you feel weak," he says, "or when the wind turns." Fringe fact: one of the more creative remedies out there involves stuffing your ears with pickled onions. No one remembers why, but someone insisted it blocked the plague from seeping in through the head. You choose to skip that one. As you head back outside, you pass another man in a dark hooded robe. He holds out a bundle of dried flowers. "Plague charms," he calls. "Real rosemary and rue." You glance down and notice the skin on his hands. Blotched purple, cracked. He's already infected, but still he's selling hope. You start to feel that tickle in your throat again. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's just the stress of seeing 100 people trying to outsniff each other with clove pomanders. That evening, a group gathers at the town square to pray. They burn incense and walk in a circle, chanting psalms. Some wear flowers behind their ears. Others tie cloths around their mouths. Everyone has their own ritual. One man wears a whole lemon on a string around his neck. When asked why, he just mutters, "It kept my brother alive." You don't question it. What's strange is how normal it all feels. These little things, citrus necklaces, vinegar-soaked cloths, bird masks, burning herbs, they're all part of a new, desperate hygiene. It's not about soap anymore. It's about protection. Smell becomes a barrier. Stink becomes a weapon. And the more outrageous the ritual, the safer people seem to feel. You lie in bed that night with a cloth soaked in lavender water tied over your mouth. It's damp, uncomfortable, but it's something. That's what this era is. People clinging to something. A scent, a mask, prayer. Because when you can't see what's killing you, you make it smell better. You wake up needing to pee. Not an unusual problem, except there's no toilet. At least, not in the porcelain and flush button sense. There's just a wooden bucket in the corner of your loft, and that's being generous. Some folks don't even bother with that much. They relieve themselves in alleyways, stairwells, or if they're feeling fancy, behind a haystack. You carry the bucket down the stairs and out into the pre-dawn gray. You pass a neighbor dumping something much worse from her window. She doesn't yell Gardaloo this time. It splashes near your feet. You sidestep just in time. Public sanitation? Not quite medieval Europe's strong suit. You walk down toward the river, not to admire the view, but to dump the contents of your bucket like everyone else. The river runs thick with waste, human, animal, industrial. And still, it's the same river where people bathe, wash clothes, and yes, drink. This is how the system works. In wealthier homes, there might be a privy, a small wooden room with a hole leading to a cesspit below. If you're lucky, it doesn't collapse. If you're unlucky, the pit floods during a storm and seeps back up into your floorboards. Cozy. If you're in the city, though, you probably use a garderobe, a hole in the wall that lets your waste drop directly into a moat or the street. Sometimes it's covered. Sometimes it's not. Either way, don't walk under balconies too closely. And here's a lovely fringe tidbit. Some castles built double-decker garderobes so multiple people could use the same chute, one above the other. That's right. 2 floors, 1 target. Just don't look up. Now, public toilets? They do exist in some cities, usually near markets or bridges. Wooden benches with holes, communal style.
No divides. No flushing.
Just you and the town baker having a moment of quiet reflection side by side. People might even chat while they go, "How's your bread rising? Bit lumpy, thanks." You wander by one of these communal spots near the docks. It reeks, but no one cares. A few fishermen squat comfortably, pants bunched at their ankles, discussing eel prices. A boy waits his turn while chewing on a raw carrot. You decide to hold it. But what about wiping? Well, this is where things get truly creative. Moss, straw, rags, water if available, even handfuls of snow in colder regions. Some people carry personal cloths, reusable, of course. Others go full natural and just drip dry. Toilet paper? Not invented yet. You're centuries early. There's a running joke that nobles wipe with lace and peasants with leaves. The truth is, everyone's improvising. One traveler claims he used the corner of his own tunic in an emergency and just pretended it never happened. Fashion meets function. And let's not forget chamber pots. Every house with a second story has one. The rule? Empty it in the morning by tossing it into the street. The problem? Not everyone follows the schedule. Some dump them at night. You learn to avoid walking close to walls. Cities eventually try to create sanitation laws. In London, officials ban throwing waste out windows. In Paris, regulations require night soil collectors to gather it weekly. But enforcement? Weak at best. People keep doing what's easy, what's routine, even if it's disgusting. Historians still argue whether these habits contributed to the plague's spread. Was it really the waste? Or just the fleas? Or both? There's no hard consensus. But let's just say, when everything smells like decay, distinguishing disease from daily life becomes difficult. You pass a baker's boy hurrying with a cart. He trips, the cover slips, and out spills a bucket of something brown and sloshing. He looks around, shrugs, and keeps walking. You're too tired to be horrified. You pass a narrow alley and catch a whiff of something beyond awful. You glance down the path and see a pile of waste, human and animal, half covered with straw. Someone's tried to set it on fire. The smoke only makes it worse. You gag. And yet, in all of this, you notice the resilience. People still joke. They call the stink God's perfume or Tuesday soup. They still gather at fountains, still flirt by the butcher's stall, still chase each other with sticks through puddles that should really be quarantined. You head toward a monastery garden. The monks, interestingly, have one of the most advanced setups around. They compost. They separate waste from water sources. Some even channel gray water into herb beds. You get a whiff of mint and thyme and feel, for a fleeting moment, like civilization might survive after all. Then a novice monk runs by, holding his robes high and shouting about someone stealing the honey pots. You let the moment pass. The sun rises higher. The waste in the street steams. Flies buzz like a low drone. You pass an open sewer, just a trench really, lined with stones and slowly gurgling along the edge of the road. A dog drinks from it. You decide to never eat meat again. Or at least not that dog's meat. You return home, stepping carefully, your bucket empty but your stomach uneasy. You never thought you'd miss a latrine. But after this morning, you would trade half your belongings for a flushing toilet, a bar of soap, and a can of air freshener. Too bad it's 1348. You wake to the smell of mildew and old wool, and realize with a sinking feeling, it's laundry day. Well, laundry moment. Medieval people didn't follow a strict weekly schedule for washing clothes. They washed when absolutely necessary, when the garments could practically walk away on their own. And even then, only if the weather cooperated, the river wasn't frozen, and you hadn't already used your bucket to empty your toilet. You gather your linen tunic and woolen outer robe, both stiff with days or weeks of sweat, dust, and whatever mystery slop the street decided to donate. The underclothes are worse. You don't think about them too long. Today you head for the river. Not just you. Half the neighborhood is trudging there, balancing bundles of smelly clothing wrapped in old rags. You follow your friend Agnes, who's already mumbling about how her husband keeps forgetting. to air out his hose. Men, she says. If they can't smell it, it doesn't exist. When you arrive, you claim a flat rock on the bank and start laying things out. There are no baskets of lavender-scented detergent or soft-touch fabric sheets here. Your arsenal: river water, lye soap made from wood ash and animal fat, and a flat paddle for beating the clothes into submission. You dunk the linen shirt and instantly regret it. The water's freezing. The fabric stiffens, then loosens, like it's sighing in relief. You begin scrubbing with a chunk of homemade soap. It smells like tallow and smoke, which, incidentally, is still better than what the shirt smelled like 10 minutes ago. A woman next to you uses a mix of ashes and sand instead of soap. She swears it gets the dirt out better. But don't use too much, she warns. You'll grind holes in the fabric and everyone will see your bits. That's the goal here, not to smell like roses, but to avoid public shame. A clean shift says you're not destitute. A scrubbed cloak might earn you an extra nod at the market. And if your socks don't reek, your neighbors might sit near you at church. You beat your clothes against the rock again and again. Your hands turn red and raw. The soap lathers, but not much. Most medieval soap is harsh, so harsh that people often wash clothes with gloves on. If they have them. A fringe tidbit? In Northern Europe, some folks boiled their clothes to clean them, along with herbs, to drive out spirits and stinks. In fact, during the plague, people sometimes boiled their clothes every night. You'd think that helped kill fleas. And sometimes it did. Sometimes it just ruined the garment and steamed your eyebrows off. Back on the bank, a child drops a sock into the river and starts sobbing. A woman scolds him gently while rinsing a tunic with water so gray it looks like porridge. Downstream, someone is washing their hair, and even farther down, someone's dumping a chamber pot. Timing is everything. Historians still argue whether laundry was considered a woman's job or a communal one. In many villages, everyone helped. In towns, laundresses were often hired specialists. These women had a reputation for being tough, loud, and unbothered by smell. Some even earned a decent living, until plague hit and people got too scared to hand over their garments. You finish scrubbing your shift and rinse it twice. Once in river water, once in cleaner water you brought from a well. Then comes the drying process. You wring the fabric until your arms burn, then spread it on nearby bushes, rocks, or a communal line strung between trees. Clothes flapping in the wind. It's a rare moment of beauty. The sunlight hits the white linen just right. The breeze makes the river ripple. A woman laughs somewhere behind you. For one breath, it feels normal. Then a gust of wind knocks a drying sheet into the mud. Everyone groans. Someone mutters, "That's the devil at work." You turn back to your own pile and inspect your tunic. Cleaner. Not clean, but cleaner. Still smells a bit like damp goat, but that's the gold standard here. You spot a man sniffing his own sleeve and nodding, satisfied. "It's only mildly offensive," he says. High praise. Back in town, you hang your clothes from your loft's beams. It'll take hours, maybe a full day, to dry completely, especially with the rain clouds hovering. If it rains again, well, you'll be back at the river tomorrow. Here's something unexpected. Wealthy people often sent their clothes away to be washed. Some estates had special wash houses built far from the main home, partly to keep the stink away, partly to protect the garments from sticky-fingered servants. Linens were boiled with herbs. Woolens were brushed and laid out with powdered chalk to brighten them. Still no softener, though. Just elbow grease and hope. You finally collapse onto your straw mat, exhausted from the pounding, scrubbing, hauling, wringing, and careful hanging. Your arms ache. Your nails are dark with lye residue, but your clothes are technically washed. And maybe, just maybe, you'll avoid a few fleas tonight. Unless they're in the straw mattress. You scratch your head. Again. And again. It's not just a nervous tick anymore. It's something alive. Multiple somethings, most likely. You know the sensation well now. A gentle, crawling itch at the base of your scalp, like whispers you can't shake off. You'd think after all that laundry and scrubbing you'd catch a break. But no. Lice don't care about your noble effort with tallow soap. In fact, they might have brought friends. You feel a new tickle behind your ear and try not to think about fleas. Or mites. or the unnameable skin crawlers that seem to be medieval Europe's default accessory. You decide it's time for a haircut. Down a narrow street where cats sleep on windowsills and people throw slop from second floors with minimal warning, you find the local barber. Not the stylish kind. This one sharpens his scissors on a wet stone while smoking a pipe carved from bone. His apron is stained with something that used to be red. You step inside anyway. He doesn't ask what style you want. He just points to the stool, then examines your hair with the care of a man inspecting firewood for termites. Lice, he grunts. Lots of them. Welcome to the medieval salon, where a haircut isn't about fashion, it's pest control. He grabs a small comb with teeth so close together it looks like a saw blade. Hold still, he mutters. He starts scraping your scalp like he's sanding a table. The comb fills quickly. He dunks it in a bowl of vinegar and starts again. You ask if he's seen worse. He laughs. Once pulled a beetle out of a bishop's beard. Comforting. Haircuts in this era are less about style, more about status and superstition. Priests shave the crown for piety. Peasants wear simple, short styles for practicality. But noble women? They're a whole other game. Braids, veils, intricate styles that haven't seen a comb since the feast of Saint Agatha. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some people believed that cutting hair during a full moon would shorten your life. Others thought uncut hair trapped the soul inside, keeping you safe from evil spirits. So naturally, plague times brought all kinds of panic about snipping the wrong lock at the wrong time. You mention this to the barber. He scoffs. Your soul's not in your hair. It's in your teeth. That's why the plague makes your gums rot first. Well, that's scientifically questionable, but oddly poetic. He finishes the job with a rough towel rub. Your scalp feels raw, but lighter, cooler. For the first time in days, your head isn't crawling. You pay him with 2 coins and a sprig of mint. He nods, slips the mint behind his ear, and calls after you. If it comes back, shave the whole thing, even the eyebrows. You head to the market feeling almost human. But you notice others haven't had your good fortune. One man sits scratching furiously, flakes flying from his collar. A child has patches shaved clean, like tiny crop circles. A woman wears a scarf wrapped tightly, not for style, but for shame. Historians still argue whether lice were truly ubiquitous or just common among the poor. Some say everyone had them. Others claim the wealthy had ways to avoid them. Silk pillowcases, daily brushing, perfumes that doubled as insect repellents. But then again, rich or poor, the fleas didn't care. And neither did the plague. You stop by an herbalist's stall. She offers you a powder made of crushed wormwood and lavender. Dust your clothes with it, she says. Keeps the crawlers out. You buy a pouch, half because it smells nice, half because desperation smells worse. Back home, you strip and sprinkle the powder into your undergarments. You dust your tunic, your boots, your hat. Everything now smells like a weird forest. But that's the point. Scent equals safety, or so everyone hopes. You sit near your tiny hearth and think about the last time you saw someone brush their hair just for pleasure. It's been weeks. No one is preening. No one is braiding ribbons or debating whether to wear their part on the left. Hygiene is now tactical. A battle. Every stroke of the comb is a defense against invisible invaders. Another fringe detail. There's a theory that some people shaved their entire bodies to avoid infestation. Not just heads, arms, legs, everything. Smooth skin was harder for pests to cling to. Of course, razors were expensive, and shaving cream? Try cold water and a prayer. But still, the idea spread, especially among paranoid nobility. You reach for your old wooden comb and run it through your newly trimmed hair. Nothing. Just the satisfying tug of clean strands. You sigh, then pause. That itch behind your ear is back. You've accepted it now. Hygiene isn't a goal. It's a never-ending truce with discomfort. So today, you decide to tackle another frontier, your breath. It's morning. You yawn, stretch, and instantly regret it. Your mouth feels like it was stuffed with hay and sealed shut overnight. You touch your tongue. It's fuzzy. You grimace. There's no toothbrush, no mint gel, just your own ingenuity and a handful of medieval solutions that taste like the Middle Ages smells. First, you reach for parsley. It's the go-to breath freshener of the era. Not because it works well, but because it's green, abundant, and vaguely peppery. You chew a few sprigs, hoping it'll erase the onion you had 2 days ago and the salted fish from yesterday. It helps. A little. Mostly. It just gives your breath a new identity. Herbal fish disaster. To clean your teeth, you use a rag and powder, the medieval equivalent of brushing. The powder is made of crushed coral and burnt rosemary. Some people mix in powdered hooves, charred bread, or even ground oyster shells. A noble once claimed he used rubies ground into dust. Sounds glamorous until you realize he probably swallowed half a jewel trying to dislodge a chicken bone. You rub the powder along your teeth, carefully avoiding the sore near your gum line. It's been there for days. Doesn't hurt, yet, but you've heard what happens. First the gums swell, then the teeth loosen, then they fall out. All of them. Sometimes they say your jawbone goes with them. You spit into a cracked bowl and try not to panic. If you were rich and lucky, you might own a toothpick made of silver, ivory, or even gold. If not, a twig will do. You choose a clean one and prod around your molars. Something dislodges. You don't look too closely. You consider mouthwash, but that's a stretch. The closest thing is wine vinegar, sometimes boiled with herbs. You swish some around and immediately regret it. The sore gum flares up. You hiss. The vinegar stings like betrayal. But hey, at least now you're wide awake. You step outside. Breath now an aromatic bouquet of parsley, coral, and regret. A passing merchant grimaces slightly. Success? As you head to the market, you spot a blacksmith who's missing his front teeth. Not uncommon. Dentistry here isn't a science. It's a survival game. And if a tooth goes bad, there's one solution. Yank it. With pliers. By someone who probably just shoed a horse. There are no trained dentists. Instead, you have tooth drawers, itinerant workers with questionable hygiene and even more questionable tools. Some are barbers. Others are traveling charlatans. All of them share one skill, brute force. A small crowd has gathered near the square. You squeeze in and see one of these so-called professionals pulling a tooth from a woman's mouth while she clutches a rag and sobs. The tooth comes out with a squelch and a cheer. He holds it up like a trophy. "Still warm," he shouts. Someone actually claps. He offers a boiled wine rinse. The woman swishes, spits, and walks away, one tooth lighter and a coin poorer. You consider asking about your sore gum, but think better of it. You're not that desperate. Yet, here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval folks believed rubbing your teeth with honey and ashes could prevent rot. Others swore by urine. Yes, urine. Preferably from a young boy. Apparently, the ammonia helped clean the teeth. You've never been more grateful for vinegar. Historians still argue whether people truly had rotten teeth en masse or whether that's a modern exaggeration. Sugar wasn't common in Europe yet, mostly reserved for the ultra-rich. So cavities were rarer than you'd think. A tartar? Gum disease? Tooth loss from blunt trauma or infection? Oh, those were rampant. You pass an old woman sucking broth through a hollowed-out bone. She smiles at you, genuinely, toothlessly. You nod respectfully. She's survived. She probably flossed with bramble twigs and didn't complain once. You reach the bakery and buy a stale roll. You tear off a piece, chew carefully. Your sore tooth pulses but holds. The bread is hard enough to be used as a projectile, but it tastes okay. You chase it with ale, not for pleasure, but because the water is still suspicious. Later, you see a nobleman being fanned while servants brush his teeth with clove oil and a soft linen strip. He spits elegantly into a pewter bowl. The scent drifts downwind. It smells expensive, but even he rubs his jaw with discomfort. Wealth, it seems, can only soften pain, not erase it. You return home as the sun begins to dip. You swish more vinegar. It stings less this time. Your breath is still far from minty, but at least it won't knock out a chicken at 10 paces. You lie back on your straw bed, hands behind your head, mouth slightly open. A breeze wafts in through the shutters. It smells of smoke, herbs, and the faint memory of something once clean. You fall asleep trying to remember what toothpaste tastes like. This morning, you're curious, not about your own routine, but about someone else's. Specifically, what the women of the town do to stay clean, or at least presentable, in a world where hygiene is patchy, water is suspect, and the general vibe is just survive. You follow a young woman named Magda as she leaves her narrow home tucked behind the bakery. She's already got a scarf wrapped loosely over her hair, a basket on her arm, and that purposeful look people get when they're about to do 5 errands with no money and less time. She notices you trailing her, smirks, and says, "If you want to know how we stay beautiful during a plague, you better carry that." She points to the basket. It's heavier than it looks. Your first stop? The well. It's early, so the line isn't too long. Magda fills a clay jug halfway, muttering about how yesterday's water smelled like duck feathers and fear. That's oddly specific. She carries it home without spilling a drop. Once inside, she pulls a small cloth bundle from under her bed. It contains a comb, 2 linen rags, a sprig of dried sage, and a lump of clay-colored soap. "My dowry," she jokes. "What, you thought we all bathed in rose petals?" Here's where it gets real. Most medieval women didn't have regular access to soap, hot water, or privacy. Instead, they developed a rhythm of daily dry cleaning. Face and hands with damp cloths, pits and privates with another, always with water warmed near the hearth and carefully reused to the last drop. She demonstrates, dipping a rag in warm water and scrubbing behind her ears. Then she rubs her underarms with sage leaves. Keeps the stink down, or at least makes it smell like herbal stink. Hair is its own saga. Magda combs hers carefully, tipping her head to keep stray lice from falling on the floor. She catches one, crushes it between her thumbnails, doesn't even flinch. Her hair is thick, dark, and hasn't seen soap in a month. Instead, she dusts it with powdered iris root, lets it sit, then combs again. Soaks up the oil, like flour for your scalp. She offers you some. You decline, respectfully. Here's a fun fringe fact. Some women believed washing their hair too often would make it fall out. Others believed that during menstruation, touching water could kill plants or sour milk. So yes, monthly routines were shaped as much by folklore as by access. And what about periods? You glance around. Magda notices, chuckles. "Don't worry, I won't show you my linen rags." She doesn't have to. She explains that women use strips of absorbent cloth, washed and reused every cycle. There are no sanitary napkins, no tampons, just fabric and frequent laundry. Some women sew special undergarments with drawstrings to hold the cloth in place. Others just layer and pray. Some of the old women say we should bleed into the earth, like our foremothers, she says, rolling her eyes. But I'd rather not ruin my shoes. There's no pain relief either, just herbal teas and stoicism. Cramp? Drink chamomile. Headache? Pray. Blood clots? Hope it's normal. Historians still debate how much women shared these routines across classes. Wealthy women had maids to boil linens, scented oils to mask odors, even gold-plated combs. Poor women had fire-heated water and superstition. But all of them bled. All of them adapted. After freshening up, Magda rubs her hands with vinegar and lavender. Not just for scent. It's believed to keep sickness at bay. If it stings, it's working, she says, wincing slightly. She wraps her scarf tighter and moves on with her day. Selling thread, delivering herbs, helping her cousin mind 3 noisy children. You follow, noticing how often she tucks stray hairs, adjusts her scarf, keeps her sleeves tidy. Hygiene here isn't vanity. It's dignity. It's control in a world unraveling thread by thread. You pass a group of young men who chuckle and point. "Bet she still smells like yesterday's stew," one mutters. Magda doesn't even look at them. "Men think we don't wash because we're too delicate," she says later. "They forget we're the ones boiling their socks." She's not wrong. You visit another home that evening. An older woman named Agnes, who's teaching her granddaughter how to make lavender wash. They grind petals and mint into warm water, pour it through a cloth, and bottle it in reused glass. It's not perfume, but it works. Agnes remembers the last plague wave. "We used to burn rosemary in every corner," she says. "Didn't help much, but it made the dying sweeter. You don't know what to say, so you just sit, breathing in the faint herbal warmth. By the end of the day, your basket's lighter, your feet ache, and your head is swimming with new routines. Rituals passed from woman to woman in whispers, in gestures, in 1,000 tiny choices that keep the world stitched together. Magda hands you a piece of cloth soaked in lavender water. Try it, she says. Might not save you, but at least you'll die with nice cheeks. You dab your face. It's cool, clean, almost civilized. Almost. Tonight, you're following someone smaller. Shorter stride, dirtier hands, and a smile full of baby teeth, some of which are already wobbling ominously. Meet Tomas. He's 7, and he's going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about how children in Plague-era Europe learned hygiene. Spoiler, they didn't call it hygiene. They called it don't get in trouble, or stop wiping that on your sleeve. You wake in the cramped space Tomas shares with his 2 brothers. The room smells like straw, onions, and the faint mildew of perpetual damp. The boys are already squabbling over whose turn it is to fetch water. Tomas loses, which means you're tagging along. He carries a small wooden bucket and stops to spit on a rock first, just for fun. A man yells at him. He yells back. That's about as formal as his morning routine gets. At the well, he waits his turn, then dunks the bucket and hauls it back with 2 hands. Once home, his mother pours a ladleful into a basin. Wash your face, she says. Tomas splashes some on his cheeks, then immediately wipes his nose with the same hand. Cleanish. Next comes the mouth. Not brushing. There's no toothbrush in sight, but rubbing the teeth with a rag dipped in salt or ashes. Tomas chews a parsley stem afterward, mostly because it makes his brother jealous. Good enough, his mother says, tying a frayed cord around his waist. It holds up his trousers and gives her something to grab when he bolts for the door, which he does moments later. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some households taught kids to gargle with stale ale. It wasn't exactly mouthwash, but it was boiled, slightly antiseptic, and better tasting than well water with a frog in it. Tomas sadly only gets vinegar. As he dashes toward the square, he wipes his hand on his tunic. That's fine. It's the same tunic he's worn all week. Underneath, he's got a linen shift, if he's lucky, and some wool socks that may have started out as gloves in a previous life. Now, the question of bathing. Once a week, maybe. Once a month, more likely. But kids like Tomas get scrubbed down in a barrel or wooden tub only when they start to stink or scratch too much, which, judging by the wriggling at his collar, is now. Back home in the evening, his mother will fill a small tub with warm water, warmed on the hearth, bucket by bucket. He'll get a scrub with lye soap, eyes squeezed shut, mouth firmly clamped to avoid a taste of it. His brothers will go next in the same water. By the end, it's a soup of dirt, twigs, and what you hope is just soap scum. You see the bath setup drying outside. Tub tipped over, rags hanging from a line, a comb stuck upright in a lump of wax. That's the knit comb. Once a week, maybe more if there's lice. The rule is, if the comb makes a ticking sound as it pulls through the hair, that's a good thing. If it makes no sound, it means the lice are hiding deeper. Tick, 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 Tomas sings, watching his sister yank the comb through his curls. He winces but doesn't complain. She smears a paste of vinegar and ash onto his scalp. To burn the bugs, she says cheerfully. Historians still debate whether kids had better natural immunity to the plague or just seemed to die less often because their deaths weren't always recorded. What we do know, childhood was not squeaky clean. It was muddy, scratchy, and sticky. Hygiene was taught as a set of rules. Don't touch the dog's sores. Don't drink from the ditch. Don't eat bread with black spots, and hoped for miracles. Tomas visits the church school once a week. There, he learns Latin prayers and how to read psalms. The priest encourages the kids to wash their hands before lessons. One boy dunks his hands in holy water. Another spits in his own palm and rubs them together. Points for creativity. Some parents teach cleanliness with rhymes. Hands to wash and face to shine. Say your prayers and you'll be fine. It's less about sanitation and more about routine. Something to do before bed. Something to anchor the day. You watch as Tomas helps his mother in the garden. She shows him how to rinse carrots in a bucket before eating them. He takes a bite of one still speckled with dirt. She sighs. Well, the dirt'll weigh him down if he tries to float away. She doesn't worry much. He's still running, laughing, climbing trees. No signs of fever or swelling. Yet, that night, she wipes his hands with a cloth, checks his scalp, and smooths his blanket. It's made of old cloaks stitched together. She kisses his forehead and says a prayer, not for cleanliness, but for protection. Tomas whispers, I didn't touch the sick man today. She nods. He did, though. You saw it. You rise before the sun, slipping through the quiet streets toward a walled stone compound on the edge of town. The convent. You're spending today with the nuns, and while you expect spiritual murmurs, incense, and maybe a goat or two, what you don't expect is one of the most surprisingly sophisticated hygiene routines in the entire region. The convent gate creaks open just as the first light spills over the cobbles. A young novice greets you with a nod. You're early, she says. Good. We begin with washing. Inside, the convent is still and cool. It smells of lavender, beeswax, and old wood.
No rot. No waste.
Just peace. It's immediately strange, like you've entered a bubble where the outside world doesn't press so hard against your skin. The nuns begin their day at the lavabo, a communal washing station. It's a long stone trough with a spout fashioned from a worn iron pipe. Water trickles slowly into a basin. Each woman takes a turn, dipping her hands and wiping her face with a clean, folded cloth. No lye soap here. Instead, they use a simple herbal mix of ash, rosemary, and rainwater, filtered through linen and stored in clay jars. It smells faintly of earth and pine. One nun sees your expression and smiles. God gave us herbs for cleansing, she says, and vinegar for everything else. You follow them to the kitchen garden, where they collect mint and marjoram. Not just for food, the eldest sister says. We rub mint on our necks when the weather's hot. Keeps the flies off. She chuckles. Also keeps the novices from falling asleep during prayers. Here's your historical fact. Many religious communities, particularly Benedictines and Cistercians, had hygiene routines that far exceeded those of the general public. Rules required hand-washing before meals, foot-washing rituals during holy seasons, and the maintenance of lavatories with running water systems powered by aqueducts or rain channels. Some even had designated infirmers, whose role included keeping the sick clean and bedding fresh. You're led to a small room filled with folded linen. Clean cloths are stacked with surprising precision. The convent has a weekly laundry cycle, with different nuns assigned to boiling, rinsing, hanging, and mending. There's a rhythm to it like liturgy for the body. You ask whether they bathe, expecting a shrug. Instead, the elder nun leads you to a private chamber with a stone tub and a fireplace. On feast days, she says, or when someone's dying. The rest of the time, we sponge. They use warm water, sometimes with a little honey or vinegar, and strips of linen to wash the body. One rag per section. No double dipping, a novice says with a grin. She's joking, kind of. You notice their habits are cleaner than the townspeople's and less worn. That's because they maintain rotational garments. While one set is being cleaned or mended, another is worn. Each piece is labeled with a stitched mark so nothing gets lost. Fringe tidbit of the day. Some convents made their own tooth powders using burned rosemary, mint, and crushed oyster shell. They rubbed it on teeth with cloth or with sticks and even taught young novices how to make it themselves. You cannot praise God properly, one abbess wrote, if your breath offends your sisters. Midday, the nuns gather for a meal, but before anyone touches bread, they wash their hands again, this time using a mix of vinegar and warm water passed in a large bowl. Everyone dips in the same water, but the vinegar is meant to purify. You're handed a linen napkin and instructed to wipe your hands dry with care, not speed. Gentleness always. Someone murmurs. After lunch, you follow the infirmary into the sick room. It's a quiet chamber with simple beds, clean sheets, and bowls of broth steaming gently over the hearth. She shows you how to sponge a feverish woman's forehead, how to turn bedding without stirring up fleas, and how to wash hands between each touch. This is cleanliness not as luxury, but as devotion. Every act is done with intention. Every gesture reflects a belief that the body, though fragile, is a vessel worthy of care. Historians debate how consistent these standards were across Europe. Some convents were near palatial, with private latrines and herbal distilleries. Others barely had firewood for boiling water. But the idea of order, bodily, spiritual, environmental, was baked into monastic life. And during plague outbreaks, many nuns cared for the sick when no one else would. You ask the infirmary if she's afraid. She smiles. We are always near death, but we are also near to God. In the evening, you join the sisters in the chapel. They smell faintly of lavender, sweat, and beeswax. Oddly clean compared to the city's pungent mix of meat, mold, and sorrow. As they sing, you sit near the door, watching candlelight flicker on whitewashed walls. It's the first time in days that you don't itch. Later, in the cloister courtyard, you catch sight of a novice washing her feet by moonlight. She hums softly. The water splashes gently on the stone. You wonder what it's like to be raised in a world where cleaning isn't about avoiding shame, but about preparing to serve. You walk home quietly, almost reverently. The night smells different now, less like decay, more like rosemary and silence. The sun beats down hard today, and the air tastes like metal and blood. You're walking the dirt road out of town, following a trail of ruts, hoofprints, and something darker. In the distance, a clash of steel rings out, then silence. You've arrived at the edge of a battlefield. But this isn't some grand medieval movie scene. There are no gleaming knights or flowing banners, just exhausted men, mud-caked boots, splintered shields, and open wounds that fester before your eyes. And somehow, you've ended up helping the camp's surgeon, a butcher-turned-healer who sharpens his tools with the same whetstone he used for pigs. Welcome to medieval military hygiene, or rather, the lack of it. Your first task? Boil water. Except there is none. The fire's too low, the pot's too cracked, and the only water source is a stream downstream of 3 horses and 1 latrine trench. The butcher, sorry surgeon, waves it off. Spit's clean enough if it's your own, he mutters. You try not to gag. You watch as he pulls back a soldier's bloodied tunic. There's a wound on his thigh, deep, red, oozing. The man is conscious, barely. He's gripping a crucifix in one hand and his own hair in the other. Hold him, the surgeon says. You do. Then he pours wine over the wound. Not because it's sterile, he has no idea what bacteria are, but because it's all they've got. The soldier howls. The smell of blood and sour wine hits you like a slap. Next comes the real horror. The surgeon grabs a hot iron from the coals and presses it against the wound. Cauterization. The skin sizzles. The man screams until he blacks out. The surgeon grunts. That'll keep the rot out. Maybe, but not likely. Here's your historical anchor. Battlefield hygiene in the medieval period was more instinct than science. Wounds were often treated with wine, vinegar, or urine. Sometimes poultices of herbs and moss were applied. But antiseptic? Germ theory? Centuries away. You assist with the next soldier, a younger man with an arrow through the calf. The surgeon snaps the shaft in half, pushes the rest through, then packs the hole with wool soaked in vinegar.
No gloves. No washing.
Just blood, hands, and urgency. You wonder if they know this isn't safe. If they realize this is how people die, not from the wound, but from the infection that sets in after. Historians still argue whether medieval healers had any concept of cross-contamination. Some had rules, clean blades, separate tools, but many didn't. You watch the same knife go from one thigh to another without so much as a rinse. In the corner of the camp, a pile of discarded bandages steams in the sun. Flies circle like vultures. You see a dog tug one away and run. You follow a soldier to the camp's latrine. A trench, shallow and buzzing. He squats, does his business and wipes with grass. Then walks off, hands unwashed, straight back to eating with his fingers. Dinner is a thin stew of turnips and gristle. You decline. The cook stirs with a wooden spoon that's also used to slap thieves. Multi-purpose tools. That night, you sit by the fire, the surgeon carving a lump from his heel with a rusted blade. Gout, he grumbles. Or a devil. Either way it hurts. You change a dressing on a soldier's arm. The skin beneath is angry and red, the wound seeping. He jokes about getting a wooden arm. You pretend to laugh. Fringe tidbit? Some battlefield medics believed putting spider webs on wounds helped stop bleeding. Not as crazy as it sounds. Spider silk contains natural coagulants and was used like gauze. But still, no thanks. You hear someone moaning behind a tent. A quick look reveals a festering abscess the size of a fist. No one's treating it. The man has been left there to die. The smell alone confirms it. You're handed a jar of honey. Use this on the next one, says the surgeon. Sweetens the flesh. You hesitate, but it's one of the better options. Honey has mild antiseptic properties. Plus, the patient will probably appreciate something that doesn't burn. The rain starts around midnight. The dirt turns to mud. The bandages soak through. The boots stay on because taking them off might mean you can't get them back on again. A knight limps past, his fine armor caked in filth. You ask if he's hurt. Not yet, he says, and disappears into the fog. You sit by the fire again, sore, splattered, silent. You smell like sweat, blood, and boiled wine. Your hands are shaking. But you notice something strange. No one seems afraid. Not anymore. The soldiers laugh. They sing. They clean their swords more often than their wounds. Hygiene here isn't about prevention. It's about making it through the day. And maybe that's enough. You wake in a feather-stuffed bed, your first in weeks. The sheets are stiff, but not dirty. The room smells of rosewater and old wood. You're in the home of a noblewoman. And today you're going to learn what hygiene looks like when wealth isn't just about having clean water, but about controlling how the world smells around you. Your host enters mid-morning. Lady Isabeau. She glides, not walks, dressed in layers of velvet and brocade, her neck adorned with pearls. A maid follows with a basin of warmed water and a folded towel embroidered with her family's crest. This isn't survival hygiene, it's ritualized cleanliness. A performance, almost. She begins her routine not with washing, but with scent. A dab of rose oil at the wrists, a smear of musk behind the ears, a spritz of something citrus, probably imported and worth more than a year's rent. Cleanliness, she says, is a matter of presence, not of water. You try not to raise an eyebrow, but she's not wrong exactly. For nobles, perfume replaces bathing. Full immersion in water is rare and viewed with suspicion. She bathes only once a month, in a wooden tub lined with linen, filled with milk, herbs, or wine if she's feeling decadent. You ask if she ever uses soap. She laughs. Soap is for the scullery. Instead, she's rubbed down with fine cloths and scented powders. Her maid dusts her underarms with crushed violet root and smooths her hair with oil infused with rosemary. It smells divine, but underneath, faintly, the human smell is still there. Covered, not removed. Historians note this tension often, the myth of noble hygiene. Paintings show elegant figures with glowing skin and flowing hair, but in reality, those layers of perfume often masked rot. People could still die of lice, infections, and plague whether they smelled like rose petals or not. You sit in on her toilette, her dressing ritual. There's a silver comb, long and elegant, and a small mirror polished so finely it actually reflects. She cleans her teeth with a cloth dipped in sage oil. No crushed coral here, just delicacy. Then comes the wardrobe. Linen underdress, woolen layers, corset, sleeves, overdress, cloak. It's less about protection from the cold and more about protection from being seen as unwashed. Rich people had the luxury of layers, and layers helped absorb sweat and hide any unpleasant hints of reality. Fringe tidbit. Some nobles wore fur-lined garments inside out so the fur absorbed sweat and could be aired later. Better the lining smell than the lady. You ask if she ever goes near the poor. Her face tightens. We give alms, she says, but not contact. The fear of miasma runs deep here, deeper than spiritual faith sometimes. She avoids crowds, insists her servants air out rooms daily, and always travels with her pomander, a metal orb filled with scented herbs and occasionally dipped in vinegar. She even keeps orange peels near the fireplace, convinced they sweeten the air. Yet, she complains that one of her maids smells earthy. You later find that same maid scrubbing her feet in a bucket behind the kitchen, humming softly. She doesn't smell bad. She smells real. At midday, Lady Isabeau lounges in her solar. A servant fans her while another brings wine scented with cinnamon. She says that cinnamon clears the head and repels pestilence. You resist the urge to point out the mold on her windowsill. In the afternoon, you visit the wardrobe chamber. Huge, cedar-lined, filled with garments that are brushed, smoked, and aired regularly. Clothes here are cared for more than bodies. And why not?
Modesty.
Fabrics last. Here's your mainstream historical nugget. Perfume use skyrocketed during plague years. Nobles believed pleasant scents repelled disease. They wore scented gloves, tucked herbs in their bosoms, burned incense in bedrooms, and even soaked handkerchiefs in aromatic vinegar. Some would rather choke on lavender than inhale the truth of what was happening outside. But it didn't always work. You hear whispers about Lady Isabeau's cousin. Once just as pristine, now locked in her room, covered in boils. The servants avoid that wing. The doctor was called days ago. He hasn't returned. At dinner, you watch as the noble guests press perfumed cloths to their faces between bites. The food is fragrant. Roasted game, stewed apples, honeyed nuts. But the fear is palpable. They dine as if illness might be hiding in the aroma of the bread. Later, Lady Isabeau tells you about her late husband. He smelled of cedar, she says wistfully. Even at the end, you wonder if that was from the oils or the coffin. That night, you're given a bed in the servants' quarters. The simple but cleaner than any inn you've stayed in. The laundry maid leaves a cloth soaked in rosewater for you. For your dreams, she says. You close your eyes, head spinning from scent. In this world, perfume is armor. Linen is strategy. And cleanliness is less about being free of filth, more about convincing others you've never known it. You sleep deeply, dreamlessly, in rose-scented linen. But when morning comes, the illusion unravels. The maid who brought you the perfumed cloth last night, she's coughing, quietly at first, then harder, deep, rattling, wet. You meet her eyes. She knows. You both do. It's time to leave. You step back onto the streets, where no one bothers to pretend anymore. The plague isn't a whisper, it's a shout. People are sealing doors, burning herbs by the fistful, refusing to touch coins. A woman screams at her neighbor for brushing her cloak too close. No one's offering handshakes or help. You follow a trail of smoke to a makeshift ward near the cathedral. The building was once a granary. Now it's full of groaning, sweating bodies. Inside, the smell hits you like a wall. Sour breath, dried blood, spoiled meat, rosemary trying to keep up but failing miserably. The plague doctors are here. One passes you, beaked mask, gloves, leather cloak. You're used to the look by now. But today there are more of them. The beaks are stuffed with mint, thyme, and camphor-soaked cloth. One carries a bag of sulfur bricks. Another sprinkles dried marjoram like a curse. They don't speak to the sick. They barely look at them. Just hover. Observe. Sometimes they poke the swelling's buboes with silver pins. Sometimes they just write something down and walk away. You hear a man wailing in a corner, convinced his body is being torn apart by invisible demons. Someone brings a relic to comfort him. Someone else lights a candle, then drops it, and it burns a hole in the floor straw. You try not to breathe too deeply. Over in the corner, a nun wipes a patient's face with a vinegar-soaked cloth. Her hands are red and cracked from constant washing. She's whispering prayers, maybe for the patient, maybe for herself. You ask if she thinks the herbs help. They help us, she says. They don't do much for the dying. And yet, the rituals persist. Everywhere you turn, people are burning something. Herbs, straw, even old clothes. The theory is simple. Bad smells equals bad air equals bad health. So if you mask the smell, maybe you mask the disease. This is the miasma theory in full force, no concept of bacteria, just faith in the power of scent. Historians argue endlessly over how effective these practices were. Some think burning herbs reduced flea populations in closed rooms. Others believe it was psychological comfort only, protection by perfume. But no one really knew. That didn't stop them from trying. Outside, you pass a street vendor selling packets of plague powder, dried lavender, sage, and wormwood, tied with a ribbon. He claims it's blessed. Probably isn't. He charges extra for extra blessings. A woman buys two. You see a man covering his mouth with a book. He says it was once a holy text. Now it's just thick enough to stop the air. Another wears a pigeon carcass tied around his neck. You stare. He nods solemnly. Draws the poison out. Fringe tidbit? Some physicians swore by live chickens applied to buboes, plucked and pressed to the swelling. The idea was that the disease would transfer to the bird. The result? A dead chicken and a dead patient. But the theory stuck around. In another part of town, you find a scholar arguing with a monk. One says the stars brought the plague. The other blames sin. You ask what to do about it. They both say, pray. But others offer more creative guesses. It's the alignment of Mars and Jupiter. There's a poison in the wells. There's punishment for eating too many figs. Everyone has a theory. No one has a cure. You return home and wash your hands with a vinegar rag. Again and again, until your skin stings. You light a bundle of herbs and wave it around the room. The smoke clings to your clothes, your hair. You sprinkle crushed sage on the threshold and spit in each corner for luck. Someone sneezes outside. You flinch. In the evening, the bells toll again. Another death. You join the silent crowd filing past the church. Everyone carries a scented item. Cloves, mint, lemon peel. They hold it under their nose like armor. A priest reads the names of the dead, but skips a few. There are too many. You kneel on the floor of your room and whisper a prayer. Not for healing, but for time. Just a little more time. And under your breath, one last plea. Please let the lavender work. You're still here, somehow. And that makes you one of the lucky ones. The city is quieter now. Not silent, just slower. The carts still roll by, but not as often. The shouts at the market have thinned to murmurs. The bells ring less in celebration, more in farewell. But life hasn't stopped. It's just changed. And with it, so have the habits. You notice things first in the small details. The butcher now washes his knife between customers. Not because anyone told him to, but because he lost his brother last week, and no one wants to be the next name whispered at the church door. The baker scrubs his bench before starting the dough. A woman at the well carries 2 buckets now, one for drinking, one for washing, and always with a sprig of thyme tied to the handle. It's not much, but it's something. These aren't just personal choices. They're new rituals, born from fear, grief, and the human instinct to find patterns in chaos. You wander into the square and see children chanting rhymes while scrubbing their palms on dry cloths. Left, right, fingertips spin. They sing. It's nonsense, but they do it every morning. A game, sure, but also a habit. Even the monks, once proud of their divine grime, now soak their robes in vinegar once a month. Symbolic cleansing. One says, though he scratches his skin raw when no one's watching. Nobles begin sending for more linen. They don't just perfume it now, they boil it or at least pretend to. One lady even installs a copper basin in her garden for air baths, where servants pour buckets of warm water over her as she prays. Historians would later note this moment as a tipping point. Hygiene didn't become modern overnight, but for the first time, people began to connect cleaning with living. The word sanitas, health, starts to carry a double meaning. Physical, yes, but also moral. Clean hands, clean soul, clean conscience. It all gets tangled. You walk past a man selling soap from a cart. Real soap. Harsh, lye-based, wrapped in cloth. He's out of stock by midday. Even the church begins to change. Holy water is replaced with vinegar in some places. Foot washing rituals become more frequent. Not just humility now, protection. Cleansing becomes spiritual and strategic. You visit a friend who once scoffed at washing. He now heats water every third day. No full baths, but cloth washes, careful hand rinses, and constant prayers. It's not about staying clean, he says. It's about showing God I'm not careless. Of course, not everyone adapts. Some still cling to old habits. They say, if death wants me, it'll find me. And sure enough, sometimes it does. But enough change. Enough people shift. Just slightly, that when the worst finally passes, something lingers. The soap stays. The herbs stay. The habit of separating drinking water from laundry water? That stays too. And so do you. You sit one evening by the threshold of your home, a bowl of warm water beside you, scrubbing your hands while watching the sun bleed into the rooftops. Someone coughs in the distance, but you don't flinch this time. Not because you aren't afraid, but because you've learned how to respond. With ritual, with care, with a quiet cloth and a bundle of rosemary tucked behind the door. So here you are, drifting at the edge of an old world that has scrubbed itself raw in the face of something it couldn't see. A world that learned, slowly, painfully, that cleanliness was more than ritual, more than rank, more than an illusion of roses overwrought. It became a gesture of survival, of defiance, a way of saying, I am still here, and you too have made it. Through the grime and vinegar, through lice combs and leaf wipes, through scent and superstition. You've walked past perfumed corpses and children humming nonsense hand-washing rhymes. You've watched barbers become surgeons, monks become fumigators, and nobles fear their own breath. You've seen the world flinch, adapt, and eventually, gradually, evolve. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the blood or the bile, not even the soap or the sage, but the human refusal to give in completely. The way people picked up cloths instead of swords. The way mothers whispered prayers while dabbing cheeks with lavender water. The way fear turned into habit, and habit into something like hope. So now, as your eyes grow heavy, and the flickering candle burns low, let the sounds of medieval cobblestones fade. Let the scent of rose oil drift far, far away. Let the echoes of whispered chants, of water being poured from a clay jug, of soft fabric being wrung out at the edge of a stream, lull you. You're safe now, not because the world is perfect, but because you've learned how to be clean in a place that never was. Good night.